Welcome to Unlocking Vulnerability, the podcast that explores what vulnerability really looks like in everyday life. I'm Helen, and in each episode I'm joined by a different guest who'll bring their unique insight and perspectives from across the vulnerability space. We'll discuss the realities behind vulnerability and what it takes to respond when people need additional support. We're glad to have you here, so grab a cup of tea and let's get started. Welcome back to Unlocking Vulnerability with me, Helen. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Kate Robbins, who is Head of Customer Policy at Wessex Water. Hello Kate, it's wonderful to have you on the podcast.
Hi Helen, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to our discussion. So before we do get into our discussion, do you want to just give a short introduction to yourself?
Yeah, so as you said, Kate Robbins, Head of Customer Policy at Wessex Water. Been in this role for quite some time now. I look after our policies for customers, everything under the customer focused license condition that we have set from our regulator. And then obviously the reason I'm here is to talk about vulnerability. So I look after our vulnerability strategy, and that includes vulnerability and wider affordability as well. And I've worked in customer service and customer policy for my whole career, really. So yeah.
So lots of insights and experience that you're going to be sharing with us today.
Hopefully, yeah. I think I can talk about vulnerability all day. So
yes,
we'll see.
Yeah, likewise. We may have to just restrict ourselves to the podcast, but I completely understand that. You know, it's such a big topic, and there's so many different avenues that we can explore with vulnerability because it impacts all of us. So looking forward to hearing what you want to share with us today. As you know, this year is a big year for Helen Pettifer Training. We're celebrating 10 years of being in business and supporting firms in the vulnerability space. And I know that has been significant progress over the last 10 years. When we look back at where we were 10 years ago and then we look at where we are today with vulnerability, we can really see that we've made significant progress. So thinking about your experiences in customer service and what's gone on over the last 10 years, what has been the understanding of vulnerability? How has it changed in the water sector over the last 10 years, few years?
Yeah, it's changed loads actually in my time. I think within companies, we always had an element of vulnerability in there, but actually our focus was more so on affordability. And I don't know if everyone is aware of what Priority Service Register is, but it's a extra support for customers who need it. All water companies kind of had those support mechanisms in place for customers, but very few customers were actually on those registers, and we all call them different names. And I would say probably from about 2017, 2018, there was a bit of a shift in focus to supporting customers more wider than just affordability. And a few years on from that, we started working with energy companies, and they have priority service registers. And so at that point, we started to talk to them about sharing data and supporting customers more widely. So we all aligned, we agreed as an industry to move to the name Priority Services because it was more widely recognised and then aligned with energy. And I think there's also been that shift from talking about vulnerable people to vulnerable circumstances. And actually now we've gone on from that again. So we're now talking about people who need extra support because actually they're not vulnerable. I've worked with colleagues who turn around and say to me, why I'm not vulnerable. I've got this situation that, something might happen and that might cause for me to be more vulnerable, but I'm not a vulnerable person. I'm very, very able. So yeah, it's moving away from that term and labeling people, because any of us can become vulnerable at any time. And it can be things that, as being created within the industry. So I don't know, if someone's got a leak or if someone's got sewer flooding, suddenly that can cause stress and anxiety, for example, if they've never experienced that before. So yeah, it's kind of shifting a little bit, and understanding that there's different situations. So it's temporary, or it could be someone who has lived with a condition all their life, and we need to understand what we can do to support them as well. And yeah, just been a lot more alignment across water and energy as well. We're able to support customers, and the idea is that at some point they'll only need to tell us once, rather than have to tell an awful lot of different service providers and utilities. And I think the sector's probably in the strongest place it's ever been in terms of vulnerability, but there's always more that we can do in this space as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Some fantastic thoughts. And I just want to pick a couple out from what you shared. And I think probably looking at the PSR, we'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a bit. But I wanted to pick up with regards to what you were saying about actually the language and the terminology that we're using. That is really interesting, actually, how that terminology and how that perception of vulnerability has changed over the years. And the element that you shared about, actually, I don't see myself as vulnerable. I'm not a vulnerable person. I just need some additional support with the situation that I've got going on at the moment. And I think this is that there's always this ongoing debate, sort of across all industries. Do we still use the term vulnerable customer? I don't know. Do you have that debate either in the industry or in the organisation?
Yeah, it's a real challenging one, actually, because it's taken a while, if we took a look at our organisation, to embed. I think we've always done the right thing for customers. We've got a policy, not a policy, a kind of training program, and it's all under GEM, going the extra mile, because our staff said to us that's what we do for customers. So we've always wanted to do the right thing by customers, but it's really embedding that some people do, in certain circumstances, need that extra help. And like I say, that takes time, especially with a lot of people. But I think that, PSR is understood now by customer facing staff. But the language change is a challenge, and it's one I keep picking up actually with colleagues. So I think when we first developed our vulnerability strategy in 2018, we were using the language customers in vulnerable circumstances as opposed to vulnerable customer. In recent years, Ofwat, the regulator, have produced something called the Service for All guidance. And within that vulnerability guidance, they have actually defined the language that they're going to use. And we've taken that on because we agree with it. And so that's why we're talking about customers who need extra help. So we're still talking about our vulnerability strategy, and vulnerability as a more general term. But when we're talking about people, we don't. But, it is new and it is a change. And so I'm constantly picking up with people. They probably had enough of me, because it's something that I really care about, but
yes,
they may not in their day-to-day worry so much about. So definitely trying to move away from that labeling people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important, isn't it? And even just the language that we use, can help build those relationships. It can help build those open environments where customers then feel more confident and more equipped to actually share. They don't need to necessarily share what they've got going on in their life, but actually they might just say, I just need a little bit of extra time, a little bit of extra support. I think that's important.
We found that quite, I suppose it's an internal debate when we produced our vulnerability strategy, actually, because we wanted to tell customers about the services that we'd offer if they needed them, and so that they could almost see the suite of services that we offer and let us know what they need. But at the same time, we started to have conversations with the energy sector about sharing data with them, so that the customer only has to tell us once, and align with them. And that's historic. They've shared between sort of energy suppliers and distributors for a long time, and it's based on needs codes. So, for example, dementia and cognitive impairment, physical impairment, mental health, different terms. And so actually, because we were going down that path, we've ended up with that in our vulnerability strategy. And for us, we're battling at the moment between the balance of the customer not having to disclose everything and being able to tell us what they need versus understanding their situation. Because if someone has got dementia, we have got a Dementia Friends island that staff go through so that they can understand. And so we kind of like, well, it's good to know that someone's got dementia so that we can support because we've got the training in that space. But equally, that doesn't define what they need from us.
No.
So yeah, it's getting that balance, and I don't think we've quite made that one just yet. I think, yeah, something we're working on.
It is a work in progress, I think, with vulnerabilities. We're never ever going to be at the end of our journeys, but always just going to be evolving.
Yeah.
Which I think is key for firms to remember. It's not a one and done. That's it. Tick the box. That's done. Move on.
Yeah, no, and that completely resonates because so two things: the vulnerability strategy we've had for many years, we review it and publish it again every year. Because things change. They change in year, and the initiatives that we're working on and things that we want to deliver change as well. But also the British Standard for Inclusive Service we had, and every year since 2015 have been re-audited on that. And as you know, because you've supported us in this, is we've transitioned to the new ISO for inclusive service.
Yeah.
And I had a huge amount of nervousness about going through that process because it was a bigger audit process. And even though you feel like you're doing the right thing for customer, it's demonstrating that. And it's great to then have that validation. But just going through that for the last sort of 16 years now, each year you're demonstrating what more you have done in this space. You never stand still. There's always something else.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've mentioned a few things there on your journey with vulnerability. You've got the strategy that you've put in place. You've mentioned the kite mark. So, congratulations again on achieving that this year. But so that's just a few elements in the journey. So what else has that vulnerability journey looked like for you, Wessex?
So when we did start to look at, because we've got a vulnerability stakeholder panel, and back in, I want to say 2014, they said to us, they told us about the British Standard for Inclusive Service, and thought it was a good thing for us to work towards. And so we actually put it as a commitment to the regulator within our business plan that we'd achieve it. And so we did a gap analysis at the time. And one of the things that was missing was support for staff around mental health to support customers. And we worked with local charity, Wiltshire Mind, and we built some train the trainer programs. And so, yeah, that was one of the first things I think we did, looking at working with partners, more broadly than what we've done in the past, which was more around debt and affordability support. So yeah, we worked with them. We now have a video and an iLearn that we use, but doing that enabled us to achieve the ISO at the time. I think that sort of really set us off on the journey. And then, like I say, so we did have an affordability advisory group. It's now a vulnerability advisory panel that we have experts on across both affordability and wider vulnerability as well. We meet sort of twice a year. We built our vulnerability strategy with partners. So we had endorsement for a whole range of partners that work in the vulnerability space. We also internally have a vulnerability expert group. So across all our customer facing teams and wider actual teams, we meet regularly, sort of monthly as well. So yeah, there's a huge amount of
Lot,
work goes
yeah.
into it now. And I'm sure there's loads more
Yeah.
as well that I could talk to you
And it
about.
might be that more comes out in the discussion, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
I think the thing is as well, I think firms are doing a lot in the space, but actually when we actually sort of stop and think about it, we can't always capture everything because there is so much going on. So it's great. And it's great to hear that actually that support for the staff with regards to mental health is really important as well. It's, you know, mental health of the customers, but also thinking about the staff members as well, and the conversations they're
Yeah.
having and the impact it has on them.
One of the things we've done, and this is new, I suppose, as well within recent years, is that as an organisation, there's a much wider kind of focus on inclusivity and diversity.
Mm.
And as a result of that, various working groups have been set up. So, for example, there's the disability working group. So when we're talking about, in a few weeks' time, actually, we've got some training happening where we've got Autism Bus. I don't know if you've heard of that
Okay, no,
initiative
I've not come
before.
across that. No.
So yeah, they'll come on site, and then you basically experience what it might be like to live with autism, and then there's training
Right.
on soft skills training as well on the back of that. Actually, when we are looking to provide customer facing staff support, or we're doing communications with our customers, we now have conversations with the disability working group, because
Mm.
actually what are they doing in this space? Are they wanting to come to that training as well? Is there anything that they're doing that we can almost piggyback off of as well?
Yeah.
Because you're right, there's that crossover between both staff and what we're doing for customers. And then on top of that, I think this is probably where you going with your question. You know, it can be really, really tough to have those conversations with customers. You know, if they're experiencing things in their life that they're struggling with, you know, there are sometimes suicidal conversations as well. And at the moment, you know, there's an awful lot of conversations about cost of living and people struggling that way or struggling with mental health. So it's making sure that after those calls that our customers, sorry, that our staff have that time for themselves and look after themselves as well.
Yeah.
It's not always just about the customer. And I know, like, face to face at the moment in the field, our staff have experienced more difficult conversations.
Right.
And for them, it's understanding when it's a difficult conversation because the customer's just unhappy about something, or when something's going on in their life that's creating that,
Mm.
or if actually, you know, it's something to do with the circumstances and support that they need, and they need extra help. And we are looking at the moment to introduce a policy around kind of risks to support
Okay.
staff, and also dealing with difficult customers in terms of training. So there's sort of two
Mm.
separate strands, and one is about,
Yeah.
you know, if you're in someone's home and you're identifying something that's making it might make you feel
Mm.
really uncomfortable, and you take it home with you, what what should you be doing in those
Mm.
circumstances? Should you be doing anything as you know, a water company? If you're in someone's home, it can be make something really uncomfortable for you. You know, where does your role end?
Mm.
You know, when can you signpost and refer for support? So that's something that we're looking at the moment, is
Oh, that's so
a
important, isn't
policy.
it? That's
Yeah,
really valuable. And actually that, you know, for many of the listeners, actually that could be a good practice spot for them, is actually, yeah, could they potentially put a sort of a risk strategy in place as well for their team members? Because I think, yeah, customers' behaviors have changed, customers' expectations, and even just the amount of information that customers are sharing with frontline team members, it can be quite distressing, quite, you know, sort of traumatic for
yeah,
them. They're
yeah.
exposed to a lot. Yeah. So the big topic then, the big topic of data sharing, and you've mentioned the PSR quite a lot, and I kind of wanted to sort of focus on this because it is an ongoing topic for lots of firms, not just in the water industry, but, you know, across all industries. It's actually, you know, what data are we capturing? How are we using it? You know, how are we capturing the right data? So data sharing is a big topic, and I can see you nodding, so I know that it's definitely sort of resonating with you. So, whilst we really do accept that data sharing is essential, we also need to weigh up that there are, concerns, there are risks. We obviously need to be, aware of GDPR. So, how can we strike the right balance? What can you see in this space of us getting it really right?
Yeah. You talked earlier about, growth and changes, and this is a huge part of that, actually. And we're talking sort of 8, 9 years ago that we started having conversations with energy about sharing data. We're at the point now that we have, I think, gosh, no, actually, I can't count, 5 or 6, maybe more, data shares with different organizations. And you're absolutely right. It's really, really important that we make sure that we are protecting customers at the very start of this, and that we have a data share that is something that's going to be beneficial for them. But it's really interesting, actually, that since we've had them and we've shared data, it doesn't seem to be as kind of controversial.
Okay.
And I think it's if you get them right and are doing it with positive outcomes for customers. So with ourselves, we've got 2 strands. We've got vulnerability in terms of like priority services, and then we've got affordability. And when we're talking about priority services, you've got special category sensitive information.
Yes.
So absolutely, with these things, data sharing protocols or agreements, you have your legal teams look at them and your data protection officers as well. And you wouldn't do anything without them being involved. And they do take quite a while to get off the ground. But with energy, I mentioned energy distributors earlier. So we've had data sharing now one way with both our both the DNOs in our area since about 2018. And then for the last couple of years, we've shared data 2-way. So if someone signs up to our priority service register, that then gets shared with the energy distributor. So if there's a power cut, they can get support as well, and vice versa. And we hope to kind of expand that into sharing with suppliers as well, because they're having the contact with most of those customers. We also work with a fire service in our area. So they do in-home visits to help members of the public. And so we can share with them and they share back with us. And we've got 3 fire services in our area. We share with 1 at the moment, but we're exploring wider. And then in terms of the affordability space, we don't get an awful lot of data in water. And we've got a lot of schemes that can help customers, whether that be low rate discounts, help with debt support, bill caps, a whole wide range of things that will tailor to the individual. But we can only help them if they come to us. Now, within Wessex, we actually work with a lot of debt advice partners as well. So if they go directly to them, we'll also get it. But we're trying to do more and more in terms of how can we find out about the customer so they don't have to worry, they don't have to fill in any complicated forms. We can just support them. And so we work with councils in our area, and we've got 4 data shares at the moment, but we're speaking to all the rest of the councils. And if someone is receiving council tax support, then we find out about that. And it's really important, particularly where it's a discount for low-income pensioner. If they're receiving a council tax support for pensionable age, we can automatically give them a 20% discount on our scheme. And they don't have to do anything. It's just find out from us and that discount's applied. It's a work in progress. And there's a lot we're trying to do to make that positive outcome actually happen more often than not, and so that we can automatically enrol. But there was a whole amount of work that I think South East Water led the way on data shares with councils, and it's brilliant that they're able to to see that there's a positive outcome for them and have those conversations with us as well. But like I say, you know, it's really robust in terms of the governance, but we have very little in the way of kind of concern coming from customers.
That's brilliant to
I'm
hear.
hoping that we're doing something right there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And you're probably selling the benefit to them that actually, if you tell us, we'll share that information, so it saves you having to make a separate phone call or having to re-share all of that information, especially if it is quite, overwhelming or quite distressing for them. So, and like you
Yeah,
were saying, the forms that they have to fill in, the hoops that firms make them jump through, it's exhausting.
this is a thing. I mean, for me, like we for a long time in terms of debt and affordability, we've asked customers to complete a standard financial statement and income and expenditure form, which they're
Mm,
widely recognised in the debt advice sector. But we're asking for that. The customer is likely to have more debts with other creditors. That's
yeah,
known. And so, how many are asking for the same thing? And like for me, the more that we can give the opportunity for the customer to do something once,
yeah,
and that's so we align with that. We've been working recently with organisation where we can like do a digital online journey, because I think from like COVID and then the cost of living crisis, we're seeing a new cohort of customers that need our support, and those that are digitally able and haven't been in this situation before themselves, but are able to do almost self-serve. And our application, because we link in with income and expenditure, there wasn't really anything out there that could link into debt advice. And so, yeah, we've been working with a company and a debt advice provider to see if we can do something where, they start the journey on our website, they go through the online tool. If they need debt advice, they then go into the debt advice organisation, and then that all feeds back through to us. And we're not there 100% yet with
no,
that nice smooth journey. Um,
but it will come.
but hopefully it's a bit of a passion project of mine.
But we need those. We need that. That's what the passion projects are, the things that get things moving forward. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Brilliant. Oh, some amazing things happening. And then you mentioned around affordability and the debt advice that you're supporting with. So affordability, across utilities, it is an ongoing concern, isn't it? Sort of people not being able to meet their payments. How is financial vulnerability showing up differently now to say it was a few years ago? What are you seeing in the debt space?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert. We work with the debt advice sector and they inform us, which is really, really helpful. We've had relationships with the debt advice sector since 2004. Um, but I'd like to think they'd say that traditionally they've seen the same sort of customer client come through the doors to them, someone who um, might have a kind of shopping bag full of unopened posts from
Right.
creditors. Um, whereas I think in more recent years, it's just getting harder and harder for people.
Mm,
Um, so at the moment, there's the people that need the support the most, sort of large families, um, single families, or single people,
mm,
and some of which will be working as well and have really busy lives. And so it's kind of adapting to, the traditional sort of debt advice would have been, in your community where you can go and book an appointment and see someone face to face. Well, sort of COVID sort of pushed that all out the window really, and they
mm,
quickly had to adapt. You've got to think that, debt advice are charities as well.
mm.
Um, and a lot of them are just very reliant on volunteers. And so a lot of that was sort of wiped away from them. But they did quickly adapt to, having phone conversations or doing things more digitally. And so that space has changed, but there's also a lot of more national organisations as well that can support kind of digitally. And I suppose that's where I was coming from in terms of improving our digital journey, because some people just do want to do something for themselves and they haven't got time in their working day and want to do things, at the night time and things like that. So it's having to, well, we're all having to adapt and be more flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And are you seeing that more people are I wouldn't say happier. Happy is probably not the wrong word. More comfortable to maybe disclose financial difficulty on the digital journey rather than they are to maybe sort of pick up the phone and just even having a conversation with an agent and then it comes out in that. What are you
I
seeing any differences in your data?
I think people still do struggle to have conversations
Mm,
about debt. Um, we did quite a lot of work around our discount for low-income pensioners because, well, prior to that, so we've got a main social tariff. We weren't seeing many people of pensionable age go on it, so we then
right,
created this new one, following some research that we did, which was all around, as a pensioner receives pension credit or state pensions only for low income, you are entitled to this discount, and make it really, really simple in terms of
mm,
application and very clear who's entitled to
yeah,
it. Because there's a lot of stigma still
mm,
around that, and not feeling like something's for you, or, actually, no, I'm not in debt, so
mm,
I wouldn't be supported. And there's
yeah,
so much support within the water industry, actually. Like I say earlier, there's debt support schemes, there's social tariffs, there's flexible payment plans,
mm,
having a meter. There's things like home checks where we can come in and fit water efficiency devices and things.
brilliant.
But people aren't aware of them. So it doesn't matter how much you might put it in your bill or your magazine or your e-news. Um, you you've got to work really, really hard at trying to make customers aware. And I think we we aren't all the same across the industry, so I can't speak for everybody. But bills have gone up in recent years. But for ourselves at Wessex, more so than, they had my whole time there. And we were absolutely expecting large amounts of customers to come forward to say that they need help and apply for our schemes. And that's just not happening.
Right.
And so, is that an unawareness piece? Is that because people are scared to come forward and talk
Mm,
about it? Are they just managing other ways? We've certainly seen a bit of a switch from, there's an increase in credit card payments versus debit card, for
right.
example. But what does that mean? I mean, I use credit card to pay for things
Mm,
because I'll get my points or
yes.
whatever, or because it's just easier to manage.
Mm,
I prefer it that way. And that's not an affordability issue, but it could be
mm,
demonstrating that. And how do you
yes.
know if it is or not? Um, so we really need to work hard at trying to find customers within our business plan, and a lot of others in the water industry as well. We've got our mission to have zero water poverty. So
Brilliant.
customers aren't basically paying over 5% of their income um, on their water bill after housing
Mm,
costs. And we've got a definition, but we don't really have the understanding of who those customers are.
no.
It's not like I can just reduce everyone's bill, because that's what you'd want to do. Everyone who needs
Yes.
it would have that bill reduced so that they weren't in water poverty anymore. But it does take as much promotion, as many
Mm,
partners that you can work with, data shares, um, and continuous conversation to try and identify these
mm,
customers who need our help.
yeah. Bit of behavioral analysis as well, isn't it? It's really understanding customers' behavior and the drivers behind that behavior.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting, isn't it? So you've shared a lot of things that you're working on, that things that have been working on over the years. What are you currently working on that's you're really excited about, that's happening in the next phase of your vulnerability strategy?
Oh, this is going to sound a bit cliche, but it is delivering it. It is bringing it to life.
Brilliant.
And like I say, we don't stand alone. So, and we've had one since 2018, but you'll be aware, because we've worked with you on it, of what I've asked for all water companies now to have a vulnerability strategy. And I think everyone published their final strategy in June of last year. So kind of with that new sort of restart, I suppose it is just about kind of delivering it and continuing to like grow and learn as well, because I think there's still an awful lot we can do in this space. So I actually got a meeting on Monday with our vulnerability panel to talk about our vulnerability strategy and the key things that we're going to talk about. So last year we produced a customer friendly version, and we then did some research with our lived experience panel online to ask them their views, and we got feedback. So we're going to talk to our panel about which are the clear priorities from that feedback that we take forward and implement into amending that summary. Then also we have a number of aims and commitments. And so it's talking to them about our progress against those aims and commitments, but also comparing that to the industry or wider, and to say, are the aims and commitments still fit for purpose? What more should we be doing? And then also within our initiatives as well, the things that we want to deliver so that we can reach the customers who need our support. Which of those initiatives should we be focusing on and prioritizing for 26, 27? So I'm really looking forward to having that conversation, because I think that will then set us off in the journey for next year. The other thing for me, and it's happened just in this last year, is we now have a vulnerability working group for water. So I'm really keen to come together to have kind of more strategic partnerships with organizations, because at the moment, quite a lot of us do have partnerships with different organizations. And I don't know, I would have thought, and I haven't had this conversation with any of these organizations, but if we all came together, they're having to work with one kind of project rather than multiple all at one time. I don't know, we'll see.
And collaboration is key, isn't it? I think when we come to vulnerability, it is bringing everyone together and just collaborating.
And then also with energy, because we work really closely with them and we're all members of a safeguarding customer working group, there are things that we're looking at in terms of priority services now as well, because we've had the needs codes that we've got for quite some time. Things have changed. And are they still fit for purpose? Are there any new ones that we need? Do we need to change any of the terminology? So I'm quite looking forward to that. That's coming up in the next 12 months as well.
So lots happening. Watch this space, as it were. Yeah, exciting times. So I'm conscious of the time. So just sort of my last question then, sort of thinking about the listeners and thinking about the work that you've done and any tips and ideas that you can pass on. What are your final thoughts that you want to share with the listeners today?
Yeah, I think for me, you can't do this on your own. Like you said earlier, didn't you? Collaboration and how important that is. But also listening to customers. I think there's nothing better really than hearing from customers who've had lived experience. We've invited them along to sessions in the past with our vulnerability experts, and you can just tell that kind of the atmosphere in the room shifts, and it actually touches people, and it helps the understanding, so that we can then drive better outcomes for customers. So yeah, really sort of tailoring things to individual circumstances as well, kind of adapting to the situation, being flexible, tailoring to the individual customer. I think earlier on we said about how you never know when you might experience something, and when you might need support, and that could be anybody in any given day. So giving people grace, I suppose, and that every customer does matter. So,
love that. Absolutely love that. Every customer does matter. That really is, it's a perfect ending to the podcast, Kate. Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining today, and it has been brilliant to hear all about the fantastic work you're doing. There are all the exciting things that are coming up over the coming year. So and would love to hear more about it, so keep in touch. So
thanks, Helen.
Thank you so much for joining and being a guest today.
Thank you for having me on. Really
You're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Unlocking Vulnerability. If today's conversation has resonated with you, please feel free to share it with others who may find it useful. You'll find more episodes like this by searching Unlocking Vulnerability wherever you listen to podcasts. If this episode has left you with questions about any aspect of consumer vulnerability, I regularly host free Q&A sessions on Zoom where you're welcome to join the conversation. You can find out more at helenpettifer.com. Thank you for listening, and please take care.